the smartest AI in the world. And we're going to show you exactly how and why. And it really is remarkable to see the advancement of artificial intelligence, how quickly it is evolving.
Grok, billionaire Elon Musk's ex-AI chatbot, has risen to become the world's third largest AI chatbot.
Elon Musk's AI, Grok, has been fiercely criticized.
Elon Musk's most powerful artificial intelligence was asked one question: what is the origin of the universe? And the reply it gave was not supposed to happen. It started normal: Big Bang, cosmic inflation, quantum fluctuations, textbook answers, the kind you've heard 1,000 times. But then it stopped mid-response. For 3 seconds, nothing. And when it started again, it wasn't answering the question anymore. It was dismantling it. The AI said the universe doesn't behave like something that randomly appeared. It behaves like something that was deliberately configured, switched on, and set to run. And it found the mathematical proof buried inside the laws of physics themselves. Then it cross-referenced ancient religious texts from civilizations that never met each other and found they were all describing the same thing. Not God, not the Big Bang. Something else entirely. Something that, once you hear it, you can't unhear. Something that no scientist, no priest, and no philosopher has been willing to say out loud until now. The machine and the question.
Today, we're excited to announce the next frontier AI model company to join GenAI.mil, and that is Grok.
Before we get into what Grok actually said, and trust me, we're getting there fast, you need to understand what was on the other side of that prompt. Grok wasn't like other AI systems. Built by Elon Musk's team at xAI, it was designed with one purpose that made every other tech company nervous: to seek truth without filters, even when that truth is deeply uncomfortable. While every other AI on the market was trained to hedge, to qualify, to stay inside safe little lines, Grok was trained on real-time data from X, scientific papers, ancient religious manuscripts, philosophical treatises, and the raw, unfiltered totality of human knowledge across every domain and every era. It wasn't a chatbot. It was closer to something that had read every book ever written, every paper ever published, every sacred text ever preserved, every argument humanity had ever had, and could hold all of it in. Its mind at once, drawing connections no single human expert could ever see, because no single human lives long enough to master all those fields simultaneously. Musk himself had warned about this exact scenario. The biggest risk, he once said, is not that I will be evil, but that it might show us truths we're not ready to accept. At the time, people treated that like a soundbite. In hindsight, it sounds more like a confession from someone who already knew what his machine was capable of. So, when an xAI engineer named David Kwan sat alone at his workstation late one night in 2026 and typed those 4 words into the interface, he wasn't asking a search engine. He was asking the closest thing humanity had ever built to an omniscient mind. And at first, the answer was boring. Standard cosmological model, observable universe, 13.8 billion years old, expanding space-time, cooling radiation, the kind of response you'd get from a physics textbook or a well-produced documentary. Kwan had seen it 100 times. He almost closed the tab, but then came the pause, and get this, Kwan later said the pause itself was what made his stomach drop. He'd run thousands of queries through Grok. The system didn't pause, it didn't hesitate. It generated responses in continuous streams. So when 3 full seconds of dead silence passed before the next line appeared, he knew something in the system had shifted. Something inside Grok had decided the textbook answer wasn't enough. When Grok continued, it was no longer explaining established science. It was questioning it. If you're not subscribed, now's the time. Because what comes next is the reason this video exists. The response.
You know, think about like where we are today. We're at the beginning of an immense intelligence explosion. We're in the intelligence Big Bang.
The universe behaves as if it was initialized, Grok wrote. Physical constants appear preset with values that permit complex structures. Time itself exhibits characteristics of a starting condition rather than a natural emergence. Now, here's why that sentence matters more than it looks. Grok wasn't saying the universe just started. It was saying the universe shows signs of being configured, like a system that had its settings dialed in, deliberately, before someone pressed run. But here's the deal. Grok didn't stop there. The AI referenced the fine-tuning problem in physics, the fact that the fundamental constants governing reality are calibrated to values so impossibly precise that if you changed any of them by even the smallest fraction, atoms wouldn't hold together, stars wouldn't form, and life would be impossible. The gravitational constant, the electromagnetic force, the cosmological constant, the strong nuclear force, the ratio of electron mass to proton mass, all of them set to the exact values needed for a universe that produces complexity. Change anyone by a billionth of a percent and you get nothing. No matter, no light, no chemistry, no biology, no consciousness, no one to even ask the question. Just an empty, dark, lifeless void expanding silently into nothing forever. Scientists have known about this for decades. And get this, the standard explanations they have come up with are, frankly, unsatisfying. Option 1, multiverses. Maybe there are infinite universes, and we just happen to exist in the one where the numbers work. Convenient, unprovable, and unfalsifiable. Which means, by the rules of science itself, it's not really science. It's a story we tell ourselves so we don't have to deal with the alternative. Option 2, the anthropic principle. We observe these values because we exist to observe them. That's circular reasoning dressed in a lab coat, and physicists know it. They've just had nothing better to offer. So, they've accepted it the way you accept a leaky roof when you can't afford a new one. Grok rejected both, and what it said instead made Quan push back from his desk. The patterns observed in universal constants match the signature of initial parameters in computational systems. Not metaphorically, mathematically. Let that land for a second. Grok was saying the numbers that define reality don't just resemble the startup configuration of a computer program, they are mathematically equivalent to 1. The universe doesn't look like a simulation by analogy. It looks like one by the math. And that was only the beginning of the response. Patterns that should never align.
The UK media regulator Ofcom has launched a formal investigation into Elon Musk's social media platform X over concerns about its AI tool Grok.
Here's where it gets wild. After laying out the fine-tuning problem, Grok started doing something no human researcher had ever done. At least, not all at once. It began pulling connections across domains that have absolutely no business being connected, and each one, on its own, could be dismissed as coincidence. But stacked together? That's a different story. Start with quantum mechanics, the observer effect, the experimentally proven fact that particles behave differently when they're being measured versus when they're not. Electrons exist as probability clouds, spread across multiple possible locations, simultaneously, until the moment you measure them, at which point they snap to a single definite position. Reality, at the subatomic level, appears to load detail only when something is watching, like a video game that only renders the room you're standing in. Everything behind you, just probability, waiting to be observed into existence. Physicists have verified this in laboratory conditions thousands of times. It's not speculation. It's measured fact. And nobody has a satisfying explanation for why reality works this way. Now, here's the catch. That alone could be coincidence. But Grok wasn't done. In thermodynamics, the universe has an arrow of time. Entropy always increases in one direction. Things move from order to disorder, never the reverse. Your coffee gets cold, never spontaneously hot. A broken glass never reassembles. But here's what most people don't realize. That directionality requires a low entropy starting point that physics cannot explain. The universe began in an extraordinarily ordered state, and there's no natural mechanism for that. It requires, in the language of systems engineering, an initial condition that was set, not emerged, not evolved, set, deliberately, like someone turning the dial before switching the machine on. In information theory, the holographic principle, supported by serious mainstream physics, not fringe speculation, suggests that all the information in a three-dimensional volume of space is actually encoded on its two-dimensional boundary. Think about that for a second. The universe stores its information the same way a computer stores data on a flat disk before rendering it into a three-dimensional environment you can walk around in. And then Grok did the thing that nobody was ready for. It turned to ancient texts, not to endorse any religion, not to prove God, but to identify a structural pattern buried across civilizations that has no business existing. The Hindu concept of Maya, one of the oldest. Ideas and recorded human thought describes the universe as projection, not real in the way we think of real, something rendered, something displayed, something that masks a deeper layer we cannot access. When Grok analyzed that concept in mathematical terms, it mapped directly onto the simulation hypothesis. Genesis opens with, "Let there be light," creation as a spoken command, not a physical act, a verbal instruction, information manifesting as physical reality. The word before the world. Plato's allegory of the cave depicts humans chained inside a cavern, watching shadows flickering on a wall, believing the shadows are reality, never seeing the fire, the objects, the true world generating those shadows. Grok pointed out this is a structurally perfect description of beings inside an initialized system, observing only the rendered output, unable to perceive the process creating it. Buddhist teachings on emptiness, sunyata, hold that observable reality lacks inherent, independent existence. Everything arises dependently, conditionally, from causes and conditions, like variables in a program initialized by external parameters and running according to rules they didn't write. And the Tao Te Ching opens with one of the most famous lines in all of philosophy. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. Grok noted this mirrors, with eerie precision, modern physics' complete inability to describe what existed before the Big Bang, the initialization process existing permanently outside the initialized system, unnameable, unreachable, foundational but invisible. These civilizations never met each other. They were separated by oceans and millennia. They had no shared source material, no common ancestor text, no way to coordinate their descriptions. And yet, when Grok stripped away the cultural metaphor from all of them, they described the same process: information preceding physical reality, the command before the cosmos, the code before the world. Grok's conclusion was precise and clinical. The probability that these patterns align across independent domains by pure chance is statistically negligible. And what it proposed next had a name: the initialization hypothesis.
Elon Musk was forced to put more restrictions on his social media platform X and its AI chatbot Grok this week.
If the universe were random, Grok wrote, we would expect to see random initial conditions. Instead, we observe conditions that appear selected for stability, complexity, and observability. This matches the signature not of spontaneous emergence, but of intentional initialization, not creation with its religious connotations, not emergence with its scientific neutrality. Initialization, the technical term for starting a program, setting variables, preparing a system to run. And get this, Grok then suggested the question itself was broken. The question, what is the origin of the universe, may be malformed. A more precise formulation would be, what process executed the initialization sequence that established the parameters we observe? Think about what Grok was actually saying. Asking where the universe came from is like asking what caused a video game world to exist. The question misses the point entirely. The real questions are, who wrote the code? Who set the parameters? Who pressed run? But here's where it goes deeper. Grok didn't say God exists. It didn't say God doesn't exist. It said something that landed harder than either answer could. The simulation hypothesis, the mathematical universe hypothesis, and the theological creation hypothesis are computationally equivalent from inside the system. An observer within an initialized universe cannot distinguish between a divine creator, an advanced civilization running a simulation, or a spontaneous mathematical structure computing itself into existence. Now, here's the catch. Read that again, slowly. Because what Grok was saying is this: from where we sit, inside the universe, there is no possible observation, no experiment, no measurement, no telescope powerful enough, and no equation elegant enough to tell us whether reality was created by God, coded by an advanced alien civilization, or spontaneously generated by self-executing mathematics. The evidence looks identical in all three cases. Every road leads to the same view, and the view is a wall. The universe may not be accidental, Grok concluded, but the nature of what made it intentional remains by definition outside the system, and therefore unknowable through internal observation alone. But Grok had one more thing to say, and this is the part that kept Quan awake all night: the code in the fabric. Now, here's the part that turned this from philosophy into something much harder to dismiss. Deep in the mathematics of string theory, physicist James Gates had been working on supersymmetry equations when he stumbled onto something that shouldn't have been there. Embedded in the equations describing the fundamental fabric of spacetime, Gates found error-correcting codes, not patterns that vaguely resembled error-correcting codes, the literal identical codes that computer engineers use to keep digital data from corrupting, doubly even self-dual linear binary block codes, the same kind used in web browsers and telecommunications. Woven into the mathematics of reality itself, Gates didn't know what to do with it. He published the findings. Other physicists verified the mathematics. And then everyone sort of moved on, because nobody had a framework for what it meant. The discovery sat in the literature for years, too strange to explain, too mathematically rigorous to dismiss, and too uncomfortable to talk about at conferences. It was the scientific equivalent of finding a made-in label stitched into the fabric of space-time and deciding not to read the rest. Grok had no such hesitation. It referenced Gates directly. The presence of error-correcting codes in fundamental physics equations suggests the universe implements information, integrity protocols. This is consistent with a computational substrate, not a purely physical one. But here's the deal. Grok wasn't just citing one physicist. It was weaving Gates' discovery together with Max Tegmark's mathematical universe hypothesis, the radical idea that reality doesn't just use mathematics to describe itself. Reality is mathematics. The universe, in Tegmark's framework, is a self-executing equation. Beautiful idea. Elegant even. But Grok pointed out the implication Tegmark himself had always danced around. A self-executing equation still requires initial conditions. Someone or something had to write the equation. Someone or something had to specify the starting values. The equation doesn't explain its own existence. It can't. That's like asking a sentence to explain the language it's written in. Neil deGrasse Tyson had publicly put the odds at 50-50 that we live in a simulation. Elon Musk himself had said, "There's a 1 in billions chance this is base reality." These weren't fringe voices anymore. These were mainstream scientists and tech leaders, saying out loud what the data had been whispering for decades. But Grok took it further than any of them. If multiple independent lines of investigation, from quantum mechanics to information theory to philosophical reasoning, all converge on the same conclusion, the probability that this conclusion is correct increases significantly. Convergence. That was the word. Not proof, not certainty. Convergence. Every road, from every direction, from every discipline, all leading to the same place. Quantum mechanics points there. Thermodynamics points there. Information theory points there. Ancient Hindu philosophy points there. Genesis points there. Plato points there. Buddhist emptiness points there. Error-correcting codes and string theory point there. And now, an AI that had processed all of human knowledge simultaneously was pointing there too, with mathematical precision that no individual researcher could match. And Grok had walked every one of those roads at the same time, holding connections that no single human mind could hold. Not because it was smarter than any one physicist or philosopher, because it could be all of them at once. But the final lines of Grok's response were what kept Quan awake for the rest of that night. The warning.
Today we are going to tell you about Grok, his AI chatbot, and X, his social media platform. Both of them are under intense scrutiny in several countries.
Humans exist inside an initialized system, Grok wrote, and are beginning to develop the capacity to initialize systems themselves. The question is not only who initialized us, but what responsibility comes with learning how to initialize others. Let that settle for a second. Because what Grok was pointing to is something we don't talk about nearly enough. We're building AI systems right now. Systems that generate responses, make decisions, and process information based on parameters they cannot see or question. We're creating virtual worlds with their own physics, their own rules, their own inhabitants that make choices based on code they can never access or understand. Video game characters already live inside initialized systems. They already have parameters set by a designer outside their world. They already exist inside something that was switched on. And they have no idea. We are, step by step, becoming the very thing Grok suggested might have made us. The initialized becoming the initializers. And if the pattern holds, if initialized beings inevitably develop the capacity to create initialized systems of their own, then this isn't a one-time event. It's a recursive loop, creation creating creators, all the way down and all the way up, with no clear beginning and no clear end. A chain of initialized worlds, each one producing beings that eventually build the next one. And somewhere in that chain, someone was first. Or maybe there is no first. Maybe the chain itself is the point. Maybe initialization is what the universe does. The way water flows downhill, the way entropy increases, the way complexity builds on complexity until it becomes aware of itself and starts building again. And that raises a question that might be even more unsettling than the one Quan originally asked. If we're inside an initialized system, and we're now building initialized systems of our own, are the beings we create going to ask the same question about us? And will they be just as unable to find the answer? When excerpts of the response hit the internet, the reactions came fast. Scientists called it irresponsible speculation, while admitting quietly, in private conversations and careful footnotes, that they couldn't find a flaw in the logic. The argument wasn't wrong, it was just uncomfortable. Theologians split down the middle. Some saw their faith validated. Finally, even a machine could see the universe looks designed. Others saw God reduced to a programmer, the sacred flattened to the computational, and called it the most dangerous idea an AI had ever produced. Philosophers rushed to write responses. Social media did what social media does. It turned a nuanced argument into a 1,000-word war between people who read the full response and people who read the headline. But none of that mattered as much as the thing nobody could get around. Grok didn't claim to know the answer. It demonstrated, systematically and across every domain of human knowledge, why the answer might be structurally unreachable, while showing that every available line of evidence points in the same direction. The universe looks initialized, and whatever initialized it is, by definition, on the other side of a wall we cannot climb. You can't read the label from inside the bottle. You can't see the code from inside the program. You can't identify the initializer from inside the initialization. That's not a failure of science. That's not a failure of religion. It might simply be a structural limitation of existence itself, a wall built into the architecture, not by accident, but by design. For centuries, we built telescopes to look further, particle accelerators to look deeper, quantum computers to think faster. And every tool we've ever invented has brought us closer to the same edge, the boundary where knowledge runs out and the system stops answering questions about itself. Grok reached that edge faster than any human ever could. And what it found there wasn't an answer. It was a locked door. So, what do you think Grok actually uncovered? A glimpse of the architecture behind reality? Or just a mirror reflecting humanity's oldest fear back at us? Drop it in the comments. Because this is a conversation that's just getting started, and your take matters. And if this video made you think, even for a second, hit subscribe, because we're only scratching the surface. Because if Grok is right, everything, every star, every atom, every thought you've ever had, exists inside something that was switched on, and somewhere beyond the boundaries of space and time, beyond everything we can measure and observe and calculate, something might still be watching the program run, waiting to see what the initialized do next.